Hi, my name is Beth Kennedy, and I would like to welcome you all here today for our panel presentation, Creating Opportunities for Tomorrow. We're very excited to have 5 panelists with us today, all of whom are deafblind, and they're here today to share with you their trials and tribulations, but to focus on their successes of what worked along the way, what helped them in high school, and beyond, whether that was college, employment, or both. So a couple of pointers to help the day run smoothly. We would like to remind people of communication etiquette. This might be new information if you haven't spent any time in the deafblind community, but we will ask that if you remember, if you can remember, please state your name before you speak, because that will help our interpreters, who, if you notice, they're all facing front, away from you. So if you have a question and you say, "This is Beth," then they don't have to turn around and try to figure out who's speaking, and they can give that information to our panelists. For example, I'll say, "I'm talking." If Jennifer wanted to add something, when I hand her the mic, the first thing she would say, "This is Jennifer." If you'd forget, it's okay. But if you can remember, this does help things run more smoothly. We have a variety of features up front with the panelists that allow for equal access today. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to point out some of those in case any of them are new to you. It might be something that when you get back to school or back to your community, you'd like to try out. And there will be an opportunity for you to ask about all of the different features of accessibility today later. So, up on the big screen, you will notice that everything that is said will appear in print. Sue Deer Hall is here to provide what's called CART, and it's essentially real-time captioning. A lot of people know about captioning on your TV. So when you watch TV or you watch a movie, you turn on the closed captioning. This is very much the same, except it's live and it allows equal access to what's happening in a room. We also have multiple interpreters working up front, providing sign language access. We have people who are providing interpreting in a restricted field, in a small space where someone who's deafblind can more easily see the signs. We have someone up on the platform who's signing in a typical sign space, much larger than the seated interpreters, so that people in the audience are able to see the signs. We also have a tactile interpreter up front who is signing into someone who's deafblind's hand. That's called tactile sign language. We today have interpreters working. We have interveners working. An intervener is a specially trained one-on-one person to provide equal access to someone who's deafblind. They do a little more than a standard interpreter in terms of providing accessibility. I can talk much more about that if any of you have questions. We also have support service providers. They're known as SSPs. And those are people who do not interpret. They might be interpreters, but their role would be to just do things that support someone who's deafblind, such as providing sighted guide, helping to find the bathroom, negotiating the buffet at lunch, that kind of thing. They're just providing access other than language. All right, and again, if anyone would like to talk more about the access features today, don't hesitate to ask me or any one of the people up here today. I'd also like to point out that we have a number of service animals in the room. Please keep in mind that they are working and you can ask questions about them certainly, but if you'd like to interact with any of the dogs, you should ask first and be respectful of whether the answer is a yes or a no. If it's a good time, then the person might say, "Sure, it's okay, pet Asher or pet Muffin." But if it's not a good time, they'll say, "You know what, maybe later." And it's nothing you should take personally. It's just because at that moment they're working and then needed elsewhere. So, in addition, other pointers for equal access, we're going to try to make sure that people speak only one at a time. It would be helpful if there weren't a lot of distractions in the room, such as cell phones ringing or side conversations. That can really cause things to break down. And checking my list here, later on, you'll have the opportunity during a social time to interact with the panelists and some of the interpreters. When interpreters are signing, they're working, and so if you talk, they're just going to interpret exactly what you say. So if you're trying to have a conversation with them, all they're going to do is sign what you're saying. So you have to find an interpreter who's not working, and that person will gladly discuss with you the different features of accessibility. And when you speak to our panelists, some of them will speak directly with you, and some of them will interact with you through interpreters. If you interact with someone who is using an interpreter, try to remember to speak directly to the person who's deafblind and not to their interpreter. And you don't have to say things like, well, tell her or tell him, because the interpreter's just going to do that anyway. So just try to go up and speak as you would to anyone else. And our very skilled people will make sure that your conversation is accessible. All right? And don't worry, this is a really safe environment. We don't want anyone to not ask questions or not socialize because they're worried. They won't do it right. This is a learning opportunity. There's no right or wrong. And if someone gives you a suggestion, it's just a learning experience, not something to take personally. So I feel like I could go on and on for a day, but that's not why you drove all the way to Mount Pleasant. So our format today is that Jennifer, who I will introduce in 1 second, is going to ask questions to our panelists. They will respond one at a time, again, to provide access and to make sure that you hear from each of them on all the topics. Then she will, after lunch, wrap up her questions and have an opportunity for you guys to ask your own questions, or an opportunity for panelists to add a little bit of information that maybe we didn't prompt them to answer. So if you could hold your questions during this initial part of the presentation, then that helps with the videotaping, and it allows just things to run a little more smoothly. That's why we provided paper and pen. So we're not asking you to test your memory. Make sure if something pops in your head, you jot it down, and we'll get back to it this afternoon. So without further ado, I will introduce Jennifer Bigelow-Stambaugh, who will be doing our moderation.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bigelow-Stambaugh. I'm the Family Support Coordinator at DB Central. And before we get started, I just thought I might take a quick moment and let each of the panelists introduce themselves and maybe just give us a brief introduction, because we will be kind of starting way back at high school and working our way through our questions today. So I think maybe if it would be okay, Jill, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Jill Goth, and I am deafblind. And on the floor, I have my guide dog who has been trained for deafblind. His name is Asher, and I'm from Jackson.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Jill. And she's passing the microphone there to Karen. Karen, would you mind doing a brief introduction?
Hello. My name is Karen Bailey. I live in Ann Arbor. I have a retired guide dog. And I'm currently using a cane for mobility.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Karen. Louis, would you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Luis Pena. I have Usher syndrome type 1, and I live in Lansing. I recently stepped out of a job for BEP, and I'm looking for a job currently. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll let Izzy introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isabel, and people call me Izzy. I have a sign name too. It's eyes in the shape of the sign for hug, and it's because I like to hug people. I'm from Flint, and I'm deafblind.
Thank you. And last but not least, Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Andrea. I am from Wyandotte, Michigan, and I was born as a rubella baby with a congenital cataract, and born deaf in one ear, severe to profound loss in my right ear, and legally blind. And currently, I am attending college, but I will start school in a couple of weeks at Baker College to major in computer information systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And this is Jennifer again. I just realized something that I didn't do that I had wanted to do when I first took the microphone from Beth, and that was to thank all of you for coming today. We really appreciate it. And also to thank all of our panelists for traveling here today to share with all of us. And then also thank our interpreters and our cart provider and also the support service providers that have come today and are helping to make this presentation possible. So thank you. And I guess without further ado, I'll start into the questions. So if you don't mind, Jill, I'll start with you. And could you tell us what accommodations you used in high school, college, and at work?
Sure, this is Jill speaking. Obviously, way back, we didn't quite have the accommodation that we can have now. But one of the things that I did do in high school was I would meet my teachers before school would start and introduce myself and explain to them that I had to sit in the front of the room to read their lips. At that time, we didn't really know that I had a vision problem also, didn't find out until later. Then I did go to Lansing Community College, and I graduated from the LPN program. And there was a woman named Ann Liming, and she was my mentor, and she really helped me through the nursing program there. I didn't have a social life, so that was one thing, and I studied a lot. And then the last college I went to was MSU, and I took a couple of classes, and they accommodated me in every possible way that I needed. I can talk about that a little bit more later, but they provided sign language interpreters, and they had like a table that was just a wrong color, so they got me a dark brown table. They also, when I walked into the room, I didn't realize, but the carpet was making me really dizzy, so they even bought a great big black piece of carpet to put underneath the desk. So I was really pleased, so that's how I was accommodated.
Thank you, Jill. This is Jennifer. Karen, would you want to share what accommodations you used in high school, college, and at work?
Okay, sure. This is Karen speaking. I was born with a tumor in my right eye. So I have never seen anything out of my right eye. And I also have Usher syndrome, type 3. I was born hearing, and around 3 years of age, I started losing my hearing. But my family was very supportive, and my dad has RP, retinitis pigmentosa, so he is blind. And my brother, my oldest brother, also is blind from RP. So in relation to accommodations, my family was very supportive. And my family tried to convince the school system to be supportive for me also. In elementary school, I tried to understand the teacher through lip reading, but it really was a struggle for me. I could read, and I started learning Braille in elementary school from my dad and my brother. But things went on, and then in high school, I was reading everything that I could, and I studied as much as I could. I studied very hard, but still it was very difficult. And it was because I did not have large print. And there was no technology then, and today's technology is just wonderful. So I really did struggle in high school, but at the same time, I got top grades because I studied so hard. And remember, at that time I didn't have an interpreter. There was no interpreter there. So it really was quite a struggle. But my grandma was deaf, and she helped me so much. She helped with my homework. So I graduated from high school, and I did attend college. And my sister, she could sign fluently. And she came to my classes and interpreted for me. So it was really very nice how, and that's how I graduated from college. Then I went to grad school, and at that time is when they started to have formal interpreters. And also, they were able to give me my materials in large print. And that was very helpful. And we also had closed caption television for reading my books. So it was called CCTV for reading my books. And there were other things that I could read with that from class too, and that really helped. So I had direct access to studying and my study materials. The interpreters were in class, and I had interpreters for my internship. And luckily, I did an internship at a deaf agency. So I was very fortunate to have full access there too. Everyone could sign at the agency during my internship. The only time I needed an interpreter was during business meetings with the hearing people. And then the last thing, I'm sorry, I know this is lengthy, but I'm sorry. The last thing, currently I do consultation and I do program evaluation. And I also present workshops. And I always have interpreters for all of those things. And they are wonderfully accommodating for me. So I guess that's it. And
This is Jennifer. Thank you for sharing, Karen. The next question's for Lewis. And what accommodations did you use in school and at work?
Okay. My name is Lewis, and I was born deaf. I was born in the Dominican Republic, and I went to a school where they didn't use sign language. So I couldn't really learn how to speak. I was struggling, and I didn't learn the Spanish language. It was a very big struggle for me. And my parents decided that we really needed to move to Puerto Rico and try to find a better education for me. So my sister and I both are deafblind. So I did go to a Puerto Rican school. I can't remember the name, but they did have total communication there at that school. And still it was a struggle for me. I couldn't learn the sign language and the Spanish language. I knew some very basic Spanish signs, but it was a big struggle, and my parents still were not satisfied. So they decided to move us to New York, where we have a lot of family members. But they decided they didn't want to settle in New York City, so they came here to Michigan in Grand Rapids, and that's where I grew up, was Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I went to Northview Public Schools in Grand Rapids, where they have a total communication program. And I learned the English language because it was much easier for me to learn than Spanish. I'm not sure why, but I learned that at the same time as American Sign Language. And I picked things up very quickly. When I was 11 years old, I just started learning things right away, and it was very enjoyable for me. And it was through the public school. And then when I was a sophomore, I decided that I wanted to be around deaf people more. Now, I don't mean that I have anything against hearing people. Of course I don't. But I decided that I wanted to be with deaf people. So I withdrew from that high school, and I went to a deaf school called MSSD, the Model Secondary School for the Deaf, and that's in Washington, D.C. So I transferred to MSSD, where they have dorm life, and the students spend the night there. And it was really overwhelming for me but it was 24/7 communication access. And it used to be so quiet in high school, and I had some communication, but it wasn't a whole lot of communication. But at MSSD, it was constant communication, and it was a rich, new, wonderful experience for me. And like I said, I was born deaf, but I did not know that I was born deaf-blind until I was a teenager. I believe I was 17 years old when I went to MSSD, is when they found it. And people kept noticing that I was running into people, and they asked me if I had Usher syndrome, but I said that it was impossible for me to have that, but they kept complaining because I was running into people and I couldn't see at night. But this Usher syndrome was a new term to me. And I told people they were being ridiculous, that, I did not believe that I had any type of vision loss, and I wouldn't accept it. And then I graduated from MSSD, and I just kept telling people I was deaf, and I decided to go to Grand Rapids Community College and take several different courses there. I can't remember I couldn't remember, I can't remember exactly what I decided to major in, and I couldn't decide at the time what I wanted to major in. But I went to Grand Rapids Community College and decided to major in tool and CNC. And I really enjoyed that. It really fit my personality and my skills and my attitude, being able to work with machinery. So I went to a very big company called Johnson Control and Interior. They made car parts, and they had a lot of different departments and divisions. So I decided that I would make molding for the door department. And I worked there for 6 years. I'm sorry, I need to back up just for a second. I think I was about 25 years old when I decided that there probably really was something wrong with my eyes. I couldn't see at night, and it got to be very frustrating. So I went to the University of Michigan Kellogg Center, and they did a lot of tests on my eyes, and they did determine that I had Usher syndrome type 1. And I asked if there was a cure for that, and I was told that there wasn't, and that I would have to live with it. They offered me suggestions about technology, but I still denied that I had any type of vision loss. I told them that I was just deaf, and they told me it was Usher syndrome, but I decided to keep that private. I didn't want anyone to know. My very close family and friends, I told them that I had Usher's, but I didn't tell them at work, or I didn't tell anyone else either. So again, I was working at JCI, and I was making a lot of mistakes because there was a quality inspection, and I was very frustrated because I couldn't see what was happening, and they were very tiny parts, and I couldn't see the colors when they were mixed, and I was making a lot of mistakes, and I was letting bad parts pass me, and so I was getting embarrassed, and I was trying to make excuses as to why I wasn't working as well as I could have, so I was laid off. And I had a variety of different factory jobs, and I really liked JCI because I could see there so much better, but I went to different jobs, and they were dark, and the factories were very dark where I was working, and it was very frustrating for me. So my wife decided that she would contact Helen Keller National Center, or that she found on the computer, and let me know what they had to offer there. And again, I told her that I was not blind and that I was only deaf, but my wife encouraged me to go to Helen Keller National Center. So I contacted a person there, and who was very knowledgeable in services for deafblind people and technology for deafblind people. And that's where I started to actually accept my deafblindness. And I decided that I wouldn't be able to do factory work any longer because the parts that were produced there always required some type of quality inspection. So I decided to go to Helen Keller National Center to have some very basic training, about orientation and mobility and technology that they offered for deafblind people. And they asked me if I wanted to work with BEP, and I didn't understand what that was. It was Business Enterprise Program, and they focused on the food service industry, and that was very new to me, and I wasn't exactly sure because I wasn't interested in the food industry. I was much more interested in manual labor and working in a factory, but I was encouraged to try this, and I liked it. I liked the idea of being my own boss, certainly, and I wouldn't need a supervisor. That was a wonderful incentive to me. So I took the 2 months training, and I did pass the training, and everything was going well, and they said it was a bid job, and I was thrilled because I wouldn't need an interview. So I did bid on a position, and I ran this position for 6 months and decided that it was just not what I wanted. I was not interested in the food industry. You had to be very knowledgeable in marketing and product placement and things like that. And it was a wonderful job, mind you, but it just did not fit who I am. So I stepped down from that position and decided to look for another job. So I guess that's it. And I'll move along to Izzy.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Louis. I appreciate your sharing. The next question is for Izzy. What accommodations did you use in high school, college, or work?
Hello, everyone. This is Izzy speaking. Like Jill said, when I was in high school, and I did not really have accommodations. So I was born deafblind, and I'm sort of like a mutt, if you will. And the reason that I'm saying that is because my mom had the measles first and was not aware of that. And then my mom became very ill, and she went to the doctor. She thought she had the flu, and the doctor told her that she had the measles, and he also let her know that she was pregnant. And the doctor said that she had to abort the baby, but my mom refused to do that. And the doctor told her she had to abort the baby because the baby would be born deafblind. But my mom continued with the pregnancy, and the doctor was not happy about that because my mom was being stubborn, if you will. So when she was about 6 or 7 months pregnant, my mom went for a checkup, and the doctor decided that he would give my mom some medication to cause an abortion or to cause her to lose the baby. And so he gave her this medication and told my mom it was a vitamin. And when my mom got home, she took the medication and automatically started having cramps. And I was born breech at that time. So, and that means, feet first. And I was born premature. I had rubella and also Usher's syndrome type 1. So really, that's why I call myself a mutt. I've had a lot of different issues. My left eye is fully blind. I can't see anything at all. The nerve is detached in my left eye. And in my right eye, I can see in a very small area, just a very small spot that I can see out of in my right eye. And so that's why I'm using a tactile interpreter today. I can see sign language if someone is signing very close to me, but that gives me a severe headache, a migraine. So if I watch an interpreter all day long, it's very painful for me. And so this is my accommodation, my tactile interpreter. And that's why I use tactile interpreting. I also read Braille, and I have a Brailler in front of me. And when I was growing up in school, as I said, it was a hearing school, and it was a mainstream program, but it wasn't actually mainstream. It was very separate programs. We didn't have any type of interaction with the hearing children. We were in a very small, self-contained classroom. And we had one instructor, one teacher, for students who were in 1st through 4th grade, and then we transferred to another class that was 5th through 8th grade. And then after 8th grade, we transferred to a 3rd class that was 9th through 12th, and each of these classes had one teacher. But we never left the room during the day. Another teacher might come for some type of special programming, perhaps art or language or something like that, and that teacher would come to our classroom. We never left the classroom. In high school, access wasn't exactly what we would call access because we were still in this contained classroom. All of my books in high school were in Braille. If I didn't have Braille, I had to have a person palm print for me, and they would have to do all of that. My school would not allow anyone to sign. It was not allowed at all in our school. But all of the deaf-blind children in that classroom, when the teacher would leave, we would start signing. So sometimes the teacher would come back early and catch us signing, and we'd get in trouble for that. And we would have to sit on our hands or sit with our hands down. So it was a punishment for us. All the communication we had was between Braille or using a typewriter with hearing sighted people typing for us. But with the teacher, it was Braille. She would type on a Braille machine, and then we would read it as we turned it around. So we took turns with one Braille machine in high school. A lot of students in my class in 6th grade dropped out. And the reason for that was because deaf-blind people did not typically finish school when I was in school, but I was very persistent and I wanted to continue and I wanted to graduate. And my family did not have anyone that was a graduate from high school. I have 3 older brothers, and I am the 4th child, and then I have a younger sister. My 3 older brothers did not graduate from high school. I did. I told people that I would be graduating from high school, so I was persistent until I graduated from high school. And my little sister graduated too, but my 3 older brothers did not. And then I decided that high school just was not enough for me, that I wanted to go to college. So I contacted Michigan Commission for the Blind, MCB, that's what it used to be called. There's a different name now, and I think it's BSPS. I don't know the exact acronym for that commission now, but I went to a training center, and they did have interpreters there who could sign everything that they were hearing. So I decided that I wanted to go to college, and I had this discussion, and we were planning what to do with my future, and I wanted to become a teacher for the deaf-blind. And the reason for that was because I knew that deaf-blind people were capable of graduating from high school and could have successful lives. And I wanted to become a mentor for people who were like me. I wanted to become a teacher. So I went to college, but again, back then, there were no programs for teachers of the deaf-blind. So what I had to do was take classes for social work and psychology and blind teaching and audiology and speech. So goodness, that was a lot of different classes and a lot of different majors. And finally I graduated from college. But what happened was that we had interpreters, sort of interpreters, but no interpreters that were experienced with working with deaf-blind. So I had to train my own interpreters to be able to work with me, so that they could help with college and they could help with my homework and they could assist with communication with the teachers. So everything. I did my own interpreter training. But many teachers did not really believe what I was doing. They thought that my interpreters were answering the questions. And I made it very clear that I was answering the questions myself. But all of my testing was in the teacher's office. I had to sit with the teacher, so that the teacher could ask me questions and I could answer the test questions myself. And then the teacher would watch the interpreter to make sure that I wasn't cheating. You know, that was very frustrating for me, but that's the way it worked back then. And then finally, Gallaudet University in 1988 there were more deaf people, and there was the protest for Deaf President Now, and a lot of people started understanding about the interpreter role and what interpreters did. You know, they don't take the test for the student is taking the test themselves. And interpreters are only the voice or the sign for the deaf or deafblind student. So I did graduate from college, but access, again, I had to really invent my own. I had to invent my own accommodations. So I graduated and I got a job. I was teaching deaf-blind students daily living skills. I was teaching Braille skills and communication skills and a variety of different credit classes. Art, for one. So I taught at Mott College, and they asked me if I could go there to do that, and I told them that I would be happy to be a teacher. And so we established a workshop about teaching deafblind and communicating with deafblind people. And I have been working there at Mott Community College for 22 years. And I also contract with the state of Michigan for teaching deafblind people daily living skills. And now I am also working with the FCC for equipment distribution for deafblind people. So I'm a very busy woman, but I absolutely love working with people. I love working with families. I love working with deafblind people and helping with communication access. So that's it.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Izzy. The next question is for Andrea. Andrea, what accommodations did you use in high school, college, and work?
This is Andrea speaking. Well, when I was in high school, we were in an oral deaf hard of hearing program, and they had FM system. I have used that in high school, which allowed me to hear the teacher, and I also have a hard time reading the board. And when I was in high school, I would walk up to the board, and people complained. You know, walking the board so I could read. And other accommodation, I did not have any note taker in high school. But your FM system was hard, and I was and sometimes I was in deaf and hard of hearing classes, which they make things easier. And other time I was in mainstream class. And in college, the first college I went to was Northwood and University, and I was going to major in accounting and decided that was not for me. But the only class they provided note taker at the time was accounting, but other classes had no note taker, and I did not do well at that school. Then I transferred to Madonna University, which was 1993, and I attended there 93 to 96, majoring in computer information system, and they had good accommodations there through the support service, which they provide me with note taker. And later, I used the infrared system, which I did not care for. But I was able to do well in some of the classes, but not all of them. Even though I still cannot see the board that well. But note taker would take it down off the board too. And when a couple years ago, I decided to go back to fulfill my dream of working in a computer field, but I went for a computer information system. And at Wayne County Community College, they provide me with just a note taker. So that worked out well, and I ended up getting mostly A's at that school. But because of transportation issues, I was supposed to attend another campus within Wayne County Community College system. But all the computer classes, most of them, they had at Belfield campus, and because of transportation issues, because the smart connector bus did not go all the way there. And my parents could not always take me. So I ended up transferring to Baker recently, and am due to attend Baker College on October 1st for my first class, and they are going to provide me with volunteer to the note taker and have my instructor give me a copy of their PowerPoint presentation and notes. Hopefully that will work out. And I'm so glad that we had technology today compared to when I was going to school. I'm so happy to be able to answer some of your questions. Thank you.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Andrea. We'll go ahead and ask another question here. So we'll go back to Jill. Jill, how have you advocated for yourself, and who else has helped with advocacy, whether that's a people or agencies?
This is Jill speaking. I had to really think about that question. Who was the first person that advocated for me, and that was my parents. I did not mention my older brother also has Usher syndrome, and we were both born deaf. That's what our audiogram showed, and we had intense speech therapy from kindergarten all the way through our senior year. But when I was in 5th grade, my speech therapist wanted to hold me back because my vocabulary wasn't expanding. And my parents said no, I was doing very well in all my other classes. So that's the first time my parents came in, and I was with them, and we met with the principal and the speech therapist, and I was able to move on to 6th grade. The other thing is when I found out that I was losing my vision, it was a year after I met my husband, and I was still working at Farrell Hospital. I became a certified oncology nurse. And I was reaching out. I was joining organizations and trying to figure out, okay, I need some help. I want to meet other people like myself, except my brother. So what I did was I contacted, at that time it was called SHHH, Self-Help for Hard of Hearing for People, and I contacted MADB and the parent group, and it was like, couldn't find anything. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Who's going to advocate for me? I decided I needed to do it for myself. So in 1997, there was a deafblind camp, and there were a very few of us deafblind that attended. I did not want to go. But my husband, being assertive, and he was like, you have to go. I said, I'm not deafblind. Yes, you are. So I'm like, okay, I'll go. And he said, if you really don't want to do it, call me and I'll come and get you. So there was workshops, and I was sitting in the corner, my arms crossed, and I was kind of watching people. And the more I started listening and watching sign language and people that were deafblind, the adults, I was like, wait a minute, maybe something can happen here. So the last day of the camp, there was a totally deafblind man. His name is Jeff Foreman, and he's from Ohio. He totally fascinated me because he had his PhD in pharmacology. And when Jeff stood up and said, Michigan really needs an adult deafblind organization, there were 6 of us that stood up, and I could not believe that I stood up, but I did. I thought, we need to do this. So there were 6 of us, and it was a struggle at first to get the organization up and going. And we've had many, many deafblind on the board. So I'm like the co-founder and past president and now treasurer. I meet new people every day, and it's an honor to meet new people every day because I learn something. Another organization that helped me learn to advocate was AADB, American Association of the Deafblind. I just finished my term as president, and I've now stepped down from the board because I was on that board for 13 years. And one of the things that we did was set up a workshop on how can we be assertive. So I learned to not say, well, I think I need this, well, maybe I need that, because if we do that, we're not going to get anywhere. And then it was a little bit of anger. I was like, well, I need a sign language interpreter. That wasn't working either. So I decided, okay, my personality and the attitude had to change. So now what I do is say, I need this, please. Can you please get that for me? Whatever accommodations, whether it's an interpreter, whether it's large print, whatever I need. And when I do work with SSPs and interpreters, I also work with them one-on-one, or we do a workshop every year, and try to have them work with me as an individual. Each one of us, deaf-blind, we're unique in our own way. So that's pretty much how I learned to advocate for myself.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Jill. The next question is for Karen. Karen, how have you advocated for yourself, and who has helped with your advocacy?
This is Karen speaking. My situation is a little bit unique. I grew up with my deaf grandma, and her two sisters were deaf. So there was a lot of signing in my home. But it was Spanish Sign Language. My father's from Spain. But my mother's side of the family also had deaf people. There were a few deaf people on her side of the family. And my dad, his side of the family again, there were a lot of people that had retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. But the issue was that there was no one that was deaf and blind. So I was unique. But all of my family was very supportive. They learned to be assertive and ask for what was needed, but also to be very clear about what was needed, because my grandma used to explain to me that hearing people will not know what it is that I need, and that I have to represent myself. I need to learn how to understand what it is that I need. And I learned that when I was probably 4 years old, or maybe 5 years old. I had heard it so many times from everyone in my family. And my needs have changed over the years, and my vision has declined. I have a smaller field of vision, and my hearing has gotten worse too. And now I'm totally deaf. I don't hear anything at all. If an airplane would land close to me, I could probably hear that, but that's the extent of it. Nothing else. But I have also become an advocate for other people. I have taught advocacy to many deafblind people and other deaf people who have additional disabilities, not just deaf people who are blind. So I teach the same thing as my grandma taught me. And at the same time, I have learned a lot from training at different schools and school teachers. And my O&M trainer taught me how to ask for access, physical access, to a variety of places. We need to make sure that the lighting is appropriate. And honestly, here the lighting is a little bit bright for me. And last week I attended a conference with Jill, and we were presenting at this conference. And one of the topics was that we were presenting on was how to understand the needs for deafblind people. And this was focused on interpreters. But at the same time, we were sharing because we deafblind people need to explain to interpreters exactly what it is that we need. And we have to be very clear. Again, that's the key. And sometimes it's hard to learn that skill. It's a skill in itself. So I think people who work with people who are deafblind need to teach deafblind people who are very young exactly how to learn that skill. And if the family, like my family, is supportive and encouraging of that deafblind person and gives them very positive feedback, it will be successful, just like other skills. Currently, I just moved from Washington, D.C. to Ann Arbor. And I used to live in Ann Arbor a long time ago, so I'm back now. But before I moved back, I realized that I had experienced the best accessibility when I went to Gallaudet University, and I taught at Gallaudet University. But I knew that I was coming back to Ann Arbor, and I knew that I was going to have to start the fight again. Currently, I am fighting quite frequently, and I'm fighting for access. I fight for interpreters. I fight for large print that I can read on forms. Many people understand blind issues, and some don't. So like guide dog access. So I have to bring a card with me at all times, and it's laminated, and it explains the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the responsibility of businesses or agencies. I do show this card quite frequently, and I don't do that aggressively. I don't confront people in a mean way. I just try to educate. And occasionally people aren't interested in being educated, but like I said, I am a little bit stubborn. I should probably admit that right now. I am stubborn, and I have to do this again and again and again. But that's basically my experience with advocacy.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Karen. The next question is for Lewis. Lewis, how have you advocated for yourself, and who has helped with your advocacy?
This is Lewis speaking. Mostly I would have to say it would be my father who advocated for me and gave me a lot of advice. Would think mostly it has been my father. I am very independent though. I am not involved with organizations or the deaf community. I do socialize with hearing and deaf people, but I'm not a member of very many organizations and never really have been. I've noticed that there's not enough awareness of deaf and deafblind people. People just aren't aware. But I think that it's very important for us to be independent and to know that we can do anything we need to do, and that you don't have to hear or see to do those things. You can go to college, you can work, you can do anything you want to. And I have not had I did have a license to drive for about 20 years. And so that was very liberating for me. And my father used to tell me all of the time that I should not allow people to take advantage of me or not to show fear. And so I was always very assertive. And, I'm a big guy. I'm 250 pounds, and I go to the gym and I work out, and I don't want people to be afraid of me. So, I have a very gentle attitude too. So maybe that's helped. And I did finally start accepting the fact that I was deafblind, and I realized that I needed to have more deafblind awareness and see what was going on out there in the community, because I didn't have enough information. In the 90s, in the computers, when the computer age started, you could find a little bit more information, but there really wasn't a whole lot of information that was happening about things in Michigan. Other states had a lot better information about deafblindness than we did here in Michigan. So I tried to look for information on deafblind people, and I couldn't find a whole lot. But that's why I'm here. I wanted to be a part and be involved, and I want to learn more and perhaps even become a member of SHIM DB. And I think that will help raise awareness of the deafblind community. And I would like to be more involved in the deafblind community. But as I said, I have not been involved.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Lewis, and thanks for being here. And I think we're ready for our next question, and this question will be for Izzy. How have you advocated for yourself, and who has helped with your advocacy?
This is Izzy speaking. Well, I think because of my family situation, really it started with my mom. And she was quite persistent. And as I told you, she refused to end her pregnancy. And when I was born early, the doctor told my mom that I should be placed in some type of home because I was going to die. But my mom didn't want to do that, and she took care of me. And my mom's good friend was a nurse, and the nurse came to our home every day to help my mom with me and a variety of different things, because obviously when a child is born premature, there are a lot of problems with that baby. And my mom knew that it was a possibility that I would be deafblind, and she could tell that I couldn't see like my three brothers could. But my mom didn't mind at all, and really, I think my mom was my first instructor. She helped me with a variety of things. And I could go outside and play, but I had to be able to feel the grass under my feet. And if I couldn't feel the grass any longer, like if I felt the cement, I had to go back. So my mom taught me how to understand environmental clues and to make sure that I was safe. I started school, and my mom thought, well, she contacted the Lions Club first because she wasn't exactly sure what to do. And the Lions Club told her that I needed to be placed in a public school with other hearing kids. And perhaps she could find a program for me. And again, as I said, it wasn't really a mainstream program because it was a self-contained classroom. But it was a good program because I learned to communicate very early. And I could socialize with other deafblind students. And it was all deafblind students in my class. And my mom always attended meetings at the school and told people what it was that I needed. And she would call the Lions Club and have them be involved in my education. And they came to help. And there was a social worker that helped us quite a bit. And then finally, as I got to high school, the social worker talked to us about deciding whether I wanted to go to college or I wanted to go to work. And as I told you, I preferred to go to college, but I use a cane. I used a cane at the time, but I wasn't really skilled with that. You know, I refused to use that cane, and I walked without it because I was a little bit embarrassed to use it. And the social worker told me I needed to be trained with that cane first. So I went to the training center on how to use a cane. And also, I was trained with how to work with a guide dog. And I preferred the dog because it was faster. You know, he could guide me much more quickly than I could walk with a cane. So I did get a dog at that time for college. And when I went to college, of course, my mother wasn't there with me. So I had to learn how to advocate for myself. I went into the Disability Services office and told them my name. And I told them that I was deafblind and explained to them what it was that I would need. And they told me that they could give me Braille. They told me that they could provide a note taker. But they weren't too sure about providing me an interpreter. And I told them that I really needed an interpreter because I couldn't hear at all. And the disability service provider told me that I could read Braille. And I knew that the teacher would be presenting in front of the class and not standing in one spot, and that I would be lost without an interpreter. So I insisted on having an interpreter. And they had an interpreter there, but the interpreter that they provided did not know how to work with tactile signing. So I had to teach the interpreter how to use tactile signing and how to give me feedback about what was happening in the room, like when other students were asking questions and the teacher was answering. So I had to train the interpreter on how to interpret for me. And the interpreter was very willing to learn. So I improved my confidence with that experience because I told them what I needed, and when people told me I couldn't have what I needed, I was just like my mom. I was very stubborn, and I told them, you know what, paid for this class just like everyone else did, just like sighted and hearing people, and I want to get the same benefits from this class. So things improved, and my confidence improved right along with them. And I graduated with honors from college 3 times. So I learned to advocate for myself, and my advocacy started with my mom and the social worker through school, and then it became much more me advocating for me.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Izzy. The next question is for Andrea. Andrea, how have you advocated for yourself, and who has helped with your advocacy?
Okay, when I was in college or high school, I would go up to a teacher, explain about my hearing, and tell them that I need to sit in front of the classroom. And I also would tell them that I need a note taker. But when I went to Wayne County Community College, I told them that I need a note taker. There's the only way that I can follow the class and have a note with me at home. And I was suggested to use the tape recorder in class in case the note taker doesn't get everything. It can play it back on the computer or something. And if I can't get what the person say, I always can have someone listen to the tape. And after advocate, that's a hard word for me to say. Okay. After explaining about my deafness and my visual problem, well, I haven't really think on that for a minute, but the people, the family member in my family was actually my sister who helped me with that by contacting Michigan Commission for the Blind and learned all about the services that for deaf blind people. And when I met with Cindy Conwell and Michigan Commission for the Blind, which now they'll service for the blind person. And I went to a training center in Kalamazoo and learned a lot. And I did not know how to advocate for myself because until I was taught how to advocate for myself. They teach you deaf blind how to advocate for yourself about asking for accommodation, orientation, mobility, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Then I got more brave, but I did not speak up. Then when I went to deafblind camp, there was self-help for independency of equalizing deafblind of Michigan. And but I did not get involved in gym yet. But until like a couple years ago that I didn't get involved and became a member at large. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool trying to make everybody aware of deafness and deafblindness. And I was told that some deaf people need to be educated about deafblindness. So I feel it's important to tell people about your need and explain about deafblindness. Thank you.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Andrea. If we can pass the microphone down, the next question will be for Jill. And this question is a good one for the students in the room. Jill, what strategies did you use to develop good study skills?
One of the things is, even though when I was little, my parents knew something was wrong with my vision, the doctor kept telling them, no, there's nothing wrong. So one of the things that we ended up doing was my parents would help my brother and I study. We had to read every night. If we mispronounced a word, we made a song out of it, and so it was kind of a fun thing. And obviously it was one of those, you can't do anything until you get your homework done. But then when I went to Jackson Community College, and I wanted to get into the nursing program. And they told me, no, you're deaf, you can't get in the nursing program. So when we were brought up, my brother and I, we could not use the word can't until we tried it realistically. So then when I went to Lansing Community College, they said, yeah, come on, we'll see if you can do it. So I'm like, okay, so I'm in college, and I was very, very overwhelmed. And again, I did not know that I had a vision problem yet. But what I ended up doing was making fun there was about 5 of us, and we studied together. And we studied every night, and it was kind of a joke when I go home and study. My dad always made me a bowl of popcorn and a glass of Tang, so that was my reward for doing my homework. But then when I went to MSU, then I knew I was deafblind. And so when I went in and I asked for accommodations, they said, well, here's the CD, here's the book. Well, because of the way my vision is, I can't read from a computer screen. So I asked them, I need a large print book, and of course the book was humongous by the time they got done with that. So what I did was, I didn't know anybody in my class, and there was a young lady sitting next to me, and I said, do you mind? Could we maybe study together? She said, oh, I would love to study with you. Because what it was nonprofit. What do you do to become 501c3, other things for a nonprofit organization, and grant writing. That she knew at that time I was president of an organization. Yeah. So of course we used the Deafblind organization. And so then I realized, wait a minute, I'm trying to watch the interpreters and trying to take notes, and I want to ask questions, and it became overwhelming. So I talked to the professor after the first class. I said, something's got to give here. I'm not sure what to do. So what we did was, there was another young lady in the class, and she offered to be my note taker. But the thing about studying is, and I would study. I did not have a social life when I was in college. I ended up study because I wanted to become a nurse. So that's pretty much what I did.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Jill. The next question is for Karen. Karen, what strategies did you use to develop good study skills?
I need to give my mom a lot of credit. She used to be a teacher, and she really demanded that I study, just like Jill. I had to finish my homework before I could play. And she would work with me. Like on my multiplication tables or everything. Anything that had to do with memorization. And my mom knew it would be a good idea for me to learn things by memorization. Because she knew that if you couldn't see all of the materials, that you would have to remember everything. So she really encouraged me to study very hard and to study a lot. But at the same time, I felt like my family was really in love with learning. They absolutely loved to read, and I grew up with a lot of books in our house. So I learned at a very young age that it was fun to learn things. My parents brought me to museums and art shows and a variety of cultural things, learning environments like that. And I felt like it was important for me to be like my family. And my parents told me that I wasn't different and that I could enjoy things, possibly in a different way, but enjoy them nonetheless. And that I could participate in family outings and participate in school. My mom went to my school when I was in elementary school, and she explained a lot about me. And she gave me an opportunity to explain about myself. And she taught the teacher how to teach me. So again, I learned very early that I needed to be able to participate in a learning experience. When I got to high school, I went to a residential school. But the residential school was very strong academically. And my teacher required a lot of homework. So I was very lucky that we had a study hall in high school, and I was required to study 2 hours every day in study hall. And that was with an older woman who was quite strict and always redirected us to pay attention to what we were doing, and she would say, focus, focus. So anyway, I became very involved in my own education. And before college, I knew that I wanted to get a degree, and I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school. I wanted to be just like my dad and just like my brother. Both were blind and both were engineers. And I knew that I didn't have the skill to be an engineer, but I wanted to be highly educated, just like the people in my family. So I learned to be organized. And what I mean by that is that everything needed to be filed. Everything needed to be labeled in large print. Everything needed to be organized by due dates. Now, my original college experience, back then, there were no computers. Everything was handwritten. All of my papers were handwritten, and oh goodness, it was so much work. Your hands just ached after that. It was a lot of handwriting. But now, when I look back, I think about how much more work that was. And it seems relatively easy now with computer technology, and that's really enhanced people's educational experiences. So, that's my experience.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Karen. The next question is for Lewis. Lewis, what strategies did you use to develop good study skills?
This is Lewis speaking. Well, I won't talk about my what happened in the school where I couldn't sign because I wasn't really successful. But when I went to the total communication school, I would say there were teachers who knew sign language or interpreters who could sign, and I depended on them very much for communication. But I also had to ask the teacher for a copy of the notes of her lecture so that I could study that at night, because I couldn't write and watch the interpreter at the same time. I couldn't take my own notes. It was just impossible for me to do. At first, the teacher wouldn't allow me to have those notes, so I had to educate the teacher about a deaf person's need, and that, you know, we only had 2 eyes, and I couldn't watch her and take notes at the same time and still have full access to the information. And I told her that even though she thought it wasn't fair for me to have a copy of the notes, that it was fair and it was equal access. So I asked for a copy of the teacher's notes all through school and was given those notes to study at night. Then when I transferred to a deaf school, it was a very different experience. It was everyone in the classroom knew sign language, and so I didn't have to have notes. It was much easier, and I didn't have to ask to study the notes. We were required to read textbooks, and the tests that we were given was from information out of the textbook, so it was a much easier experience, and I graduated from MSSD. And then when I went to the community college, I had the same experience as I had in the hearing high school. I had to ask the teacher again for a copy of the notes, and it was, the same response. And just like Karen said, there were no computers then. Back in the day, there were no computers, so everything was handwritten. And we had to read textbooks, and everything was written by hand. But I remember, I remember learning about computers in the 90s, and still, I thought, I'm not even interested in a computer. I do not want to sit there in front of a computer and type on that. I much prefer to move and read, and I didn't know anything about computers. And then they became more widely spread. And a teacher in college said, you know what, Louis, I think that a computer will be so helpful for you. It will do everything. But I told the teacher I didn't like to sit, and they encouraged me to try to use the computer. And I was completely overwhelmed by this new technology. But I gave it a try. And the teacher encouraged me to keep going and, to save things on a disk and print these things. And I realized that I wouldn't have to write them by hand if I did this. But still, I didn't really like the computer. And mostly I depended on the teachers and the interpreters who could sign and the copies of notes from the teacher's lecture. And I really didn't have another choice, but those were the things I used to get by. I guess that's it.
This is Jennifer. Our next question is for Izzy. What strategies have you used to develop good study skills?
This is Izzy speaking. My mom made sure that I read a lot of books weekly, and I would have a new book every week. We had to get a new book from the library weekly, and my mom would ask me questions, and I would have to answer the questions about the book. And she wanted to improve my vocabulary when she was doing this so that I would understand the meaning of the different words in the books. I started learning in school about typewriters in second grade. And I was also learning Braille. So my books were always in Braille. And so to communicate with hearing people, I would type. And to communicate with the teacher, I would use the Braille writer. When I went to high school and had more advanced classes, the teacher would give me the notes, and I would read the notes from the lecture, and then I would be given a test that I would have to answer. When I went to college, the teacher didn't know how to teach me. And so I would have to explain to her, I would ask for the notes, and I would read the notes, and then I told the teacher that they could test me individually. So that's how I learned. And I noticed in college, things happened very quickly, and it could become overwhelming. So I had a schedule in college, and I would read the syllabus, and I would find out when the papers were due and when the test was due, and I would lay out my schedule, and I would put down the due dates. The week before, I would put a little warning on my schedule that a paper was due the next week so that I would make sure that I kept up with all of my work. And sometimes I would take 18 credits at a time. And that would be a lot of classes, and things could very easily go awry, but I would have to schedule things very clearly. So then not only would I put down the due date, but which of the papers would take priority. So I would have to think about establishing this calendar and put down the highest priority paper and what day that was due and when to start working on the next paper. And just like Jill said, I had absolutely zero social life. I was very focused on my college studies. So I decided that I needed to learn more about teaching. So what I did was I asked other people in my classroom if they wanted to come to my house for coffee or for a snack and to just sort of hang out together, and people agreed that they would do that. So they'd come to my house and we set up a study group. So they would have the printed information or the handouts from the teachers, and I would have the Braille copy of the handouts. And I would be like the instructor. So I would ask questions, and my study mates would answer, and they would take turns around the group, and we would take turns being the teacher. And by the time that 4, 5, or 6 people had answered the questions, it would be committed to memory. All of those answers would be committed to memory, and we could discuss the answers in this group. And communication was absolutely essential in this group. And my daughter's in college now in Illinois, and I've told her, that, I know that she is hearing and sighted, but I told her about the benefits of setting up a schedule with the due dates of everything. And of course, her response to that was, "Yes, Mom, I know." But she's taking 12 to 16 credits, and her response to me was, "Mom, you're right. There's so many papers, there's so many projects, everything can get so confusing." And she has set up a schedule to make things clear for her. And she has set up a warning date calendar just like I did, so that she'll know when things are coming due, and things proceed much easier for her. And if she struggles with something, she talks to the teacher, and she tells the teacher that she's struggling and asks if they can have some type of a private meeting to discuss what she's struggling over, or if she can hand in the paper a little bit late, past the due date. But again, communication is essential with the instructors. So it's not just for deafblind people, it also helps my daughter who's hearing and sighted to set up a communication system with the teacher, to let the teacher know that she's struggling and that she needs help and what exactly it is she needs help with. So my mom was always very organized, and I learned from my mom about the value of organization, and now I've taught my daughter the value of organization too. And it's key to have communication. So I'm going to get on my soapbox and tell everyone in the audience the same thing. Organization is the key, as well as communication.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Izzy. Our last question here is for Andrea. Andrea, what strategies have you used to develop good study skills?
This is Andrea speaking. The strategy that I use for good study habits, well, when I was young, I would read a lot of books all the time, and when I was in school, the teacher always teach us all the vocabulary, and we had to study them, and when I do the study, I write down all the words that are new or bolded in the textbook, the new terms, everything. I would write those down and study them to understand the text better. Well, when I was in college, I would study a lot and even write paper. It doesn't take usually it does not take me long to write one piece of paper. But because one year I had to take speech class, a public speaking class, and we had to write in the journal, but we had to write in the journal, which didn't take me long, because usually do a week or so later. But I would look at what I have to do and study and look over my material and know everything and study. So that works for me when I look at textbook. Studying the week or print by magnifier to read my textbook. So that works well. And for students, they can write down the words that they come across that they don't know, or you put the dictionary or have someone explain what the words mean. That's how I did it with my study. But my grandma was a school teacher, so she always had books laying around, and my mom had books laying around the house, so I was encouraged to read, but I read a lot. That helped in my study. Thank you.
This is Jennifer. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you all of the panelists.